What's up, and welcome back to another episode of the Steel Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of SteelCurtain.com, and joining me is Steel Curtain contributor Shayne Kubas. As always, Shayne, we are getting into the thick of Steelers training camp. The pads are coming on. They actually came on yesterday as we recorded this, but then the Steelers got rained out, and we didn't get to witness anything that was happening at practice. Obviously, we're not there right now. Our own Josh Yorch is going to be there and on the field next week, so keep an eye out for the stuff that he's going to drop. But Shayne, I want to talk about today some of the players that could make or break the 2025 season for the Steelers, how they're looking in camp so far, and why so much is riding on these guys. That's going to be what we close with today. I also want to talk about Aaron Rodgers joining the Pat McAfee show. And of course, Shayne, it seems to work out that all the news drops at once as we're about to record and go live.
Exactly.
And so we'll tell you what we know so far from some of his comments, talk about some of the toughest training camp battles, the tightest positions to watch, and some guys who might be on the outside looking in right now, Shayne. But let's first start with some news over the past few days here. Cordarrelle Patterson. This was kind of bizarre to see it unfold, and he kind of made light of the situation, but he kind of talked about the Steelers dumping his old butt the other day. And you got to feel for the guy that Pittsburgh kept him on the roster for whatever reason all offseason long. He had a $2.8 million cap hit, something like that. They could have saved some money in the process had they let him go earlier, try to find a new home. They did not. And the Steelers kept him up until camp, didn't participate in the unpadded practices. The team let him go. Now he's a free agent, and we just have to be scratching our heads and say, why did they carry him all this time?
That's the thing, is it's not so much that he was cut. Like, I think most of us expected that, if not all of us expected that.
Long ago.
It's the timing of it is what's odd to me, because they clearly were going to make this move. There was no reason to think they weren't going to make this move. They signed Kenneth Gainwell. They draft Caleb Johnson. That feels like the three they're going to keep with Jalen Warren in there as well. This just felt just weird. Like you said, it was, and even he seems obviously to think it was weird. The whole situation, it's odd. I don't think obviously it matters too much in the grand scheme of things. And I hope that if he does want to keep playing, that there might be a team out there that could use him potentially. But I think we kind of know that his career is probably over, at least as far as an actual role on an offense or even special teams, maybe at this point. So it's a weird situation, but ultimately what was going to happen anyway.
Shayne, I wonder if this was truly like one of those handcuff situations where it's like, all right, just in case Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell goes down with a non-contact injury early in training camp or in OTAs or mini camp, we're going to have you for insurance to be that third running back. I mean, it's a tough situation because ideally you want to appease the veteran by saying we're going to at least give you a shot to look elsewhere. The Steelers did not do that. No. He was obviously a little bit frustrated with the situation. I think that was evident with his post, but kind of just making light of the situation he's in. We'll hope he lands on his feet. If he doesn't, he had an amazing NFL career. He was an awesome kick returner, one of the best kick returners over the last decade of football. Grossly misused early in his career. If they would have changed him to a running back much early on. And I feel like we've finally entered the era where offensive coordinators are getting creative. They know what to do with this guy now. The Savion Williams type of guys that are coming into the league now, you at least hope that they would. But back then, and we're talking a decade ago when Cordarrelle Patterson came into the league, he was tried to be pegged as a wide receiver and just a wide receiver. He was much better as a running back.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, the thing with Patterson that was always fascinating to me is, like, he gets drafted almost entirely off of his ability with the ball in his hands, right? What he did at Tennessee with the ball in his hands was kind of freakish stuff. Like, if you look back at his highlights at Tennessee, you're like, this dude was playing a different sport than half the guys he was playing against in the SEC, right? So, like this is a top-tier athlete, but he didn't have the nuance. He didn't have the route running chops. The catching is iffy. It was clear that this was an athlete first and a receiver second. And instead of moving him to a position where, frankly, not saying that running backs don't have to be very skillful or smart or any of that stuff, but it's less taxing on you mentally than playing receiver. There's less nuance to it overall. And let him just kind of run free. You take 7-8 years into his career, it felt like, before he really started to get going because of that. And obviously the kick return stuff kept him in the league. And ultimately, a bust as a receiver, but I would say certainly not a bust as a player overall. So good for Patterson then.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Shayne, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers a little bit. Is just on the Pat McAfee show, as we were live on this recording, made some comments, obviously all positive about Arthur Smith, Mike Tomlin, his teammates, praised Arthur Smith's offense. He likes what he's seeing there. Kind of just went down the list. DK Metcalf, Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin. The fans behind him were chanting, what about Muth? Yeah, we could run. He's like, our offense is talented enough essentially to run 4 tight ends. You could run an 0-4 personnel, 4 tight ends on the field at the same time. I don't know about that. You lose a lot of
That'd be pretty funny for like one play.
Yeah. You should try it out one time. But yeah, just handing out praise left and right. Shayne, did anything stand out from you from these comments? And obviously we did not have time to really let this sink in or dissect it.
I think the biggest thing is the comments, and we'll get into this the coach's comments soon as well. His thoughts on like Mike Tomlin, the whole relationship that those two have formed, and I think that ultimately, as much as we sometimes malign this organization for it, the way that they kind of let Tomlin dictate things in some ways, I think that relationship is why the offseason has been the way it has been in a lot of ways, as far as going after him to begin with and trying to kind of like maximize some things, but also Khan has been able to, I think, at least be like, hey, we have to keep future out. Like this weird balance of things. I think the reason why this offseason has looked the way it has is because this relationship began to form in the lead up to like free agency and all this stuff. So his comments on Mike and how much he respects him, which again, we know Mike Tomlin is a player's coach. That's obvious if you've been around this team at all. It makes sense that that's why he would say what he said about him.
Yeah, and if you want to see more on that, our own Jacob Harrison just dropped an article on stillcurtain.com. You can go read all of Tomlin's, Aaron Rodgers' comments on Mike Tomlin there. He's a player's coach. We know that.
Yes.
Even I saw there was comments from Braden Fajoko, former Steelers defense tackle, circulating. He was asked, and he was just fielding questions from folks on X. He was asked about the coaching situation, and he said, no disrespect to anybody else that he's had as a head coach before, but Mike Tomlin takes the cake, and we know that he is that player's coach. That should be no surprise to anybody else. If you guys have any other comments you want to drop down here on the Pat McAfee show, go ahead and drop them. It seemed like a fun little thing going on there. The crowd was really into it. They would not stop chanting behind him. Aaron Rodgers really brushed off that interception he had on the first 11-on-11 sessions, said, I don't give a crap about that, essentially. And we know, like JJ Watt said it best in his tweet early in the week or over the weekend, where he's like, training camp stats don't matter. It's not about the stats. It's trying to see what you can get away with, building these connections, trying to build chemistry. Like we overblow stats all the time. I don't care that he threw a pick 6 on the first play.
Yeah. Here's the thing too, is like with training camp stats in particular, they truly don't matter in like they matter as little as anything can matter pretty much, especially in the world of football. The thing I will say, especially for veteran quarterbacks, if you are a fan of a team and your veteran quarterback is getting reports that he's throwing 5 picks in practice, 6 picks, it's because he's just doing stuff. He just wants to know, okay, where's the arm at right now? You know, where are my guys at receiver? Can they go up for footballs? Can they do this or that? Can they adjust? They're just trying stuff. Now, if a rookie is making a bunch of mistakes in camp and it's confirmed by like people there, like, oh yeah, he definitely is just making bad reads, sure, you can say that, but that's not because the interception isn't what matters. It's the decision that went into the interception that matters with like young players, right? Especially quarterbacks. So there's nuances to it, but in general, absolutely. If you're looking at training camps, I've seen a lot of people like Trevor Lawrence is 45 of 64. They say, dude, that's not what there's no one knows that except you. No one in the training staff knows that. No one in the coaching staff knows. No one cares about that. It's really funny when I see those. I'm not gonna lie.
And it doesn't matter. It's all about the performance. It's not about the stats. Patrick Mahomes has had terrible numbers in training camp, and obviously is a tremendous football player. Kenny Pickett's been the opposite, where he's had good
great in training.
He's had 58.3 perfect passer rating in the preseason, and he wasn't good. And so that stuff can get overblown for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Going down a rabbit hole there, to say the least. But just a little bit of my thoughts on how I feel about the training camp stats. I love trying to get a feel for that. And that's why I typically like being down there. I think 6 of the last 7 years I've been able to make it to training camp. Don't know if I will be able to this year from my schedule conflicts, but you do gain some insight from being down there. And so kudos to the guys that are reporting the play-by-play and doing all the stuff out there, so we can at least have some idea of what is going on. All right, Shayne, let's shift gears here and let's talk about Madden ratings for a second. We know that I take these things with a grain of salt. I mean, my goodness, did you see Tyreek Hill's comments, by the way? I got to interject here.
I honestly didn't.
Oh my goodness. He was talking about how he uses Madden ratings to prep himself for the game because he doesn't watch game film. And so he tries to go and see who are the good players on the opposing teams. I'm like, man, how good could you be if you actually took the time to watch film and understand who's good on the other team?
I did not see this. It's always fascinating to me when I hear from like NFL players and specifically great NFL players, right? Like guys who we consider some of the best players at their position. And Tyreek obviously had a down year last year, but historically has been one of those players, right? It's really fascinating to me when I hear stuff like, oh yeah, I don't really watch film, or like I don't really do this, or I'm like, it's amazing how good some players can be just because of how talented they are, despite the fact that they don't clearly put in as much effort as some other players. And I understand like talent beats hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard is the kind of mantra. Sometimes that's not true. Like sometimes the talent is so good it just simply doesn't matter. And there's other times where you get like a Justin Jefferson who is supremely talented, but you could tell like the way he plays, the way he wins, like it is very much about how hard he works and what he puts into it. Whereas Tyreek, like you could tell with him as well, he has his kind of weird moments, but when he's on, no one is better because of just the speed and explosiveness with him. So it's interesting you bring that up. That's funny.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't even like check the timestamp on that. He said it at some point during his Dolphins career, and I don't know if it was this year or not even, but it's just hilarious that he can be that good without putting in the effort. Little sidebar there. Let's talk about Steelers rookie Madden ratings, because as we are doing this podcast, that's the only thing that's been released so far. That's in the 99 club, which we should probably mention that TJ Watt did not make the 99 club again. You know who made it though? Myles Garrett. He's been made every year since July of 2022, which was Madden NFL 23. You can understand. I mean, I don't have complaints about Garrett making it. I just think that Watt is, particularly you go back to the 2019-2020 season, he's been deserving of that honor. It never happened. Unlikely to happen at this point now that he's reached his 30s. He needs a phenomenal season to try to sway this EA Sports developers here to give him that rating for next year, but time is running out. Probably not going to get there. He did not make that. So let's talk about the rookie Madden ratings, though, and kind of how they compare to everyone else. Madden gave Steelers first round pick Derek Harmon a 77. Overall rating, by the way, the highest on the game was Travis Hunter. Among the rookies was Travis Hunter with an 84. You don't see that very often. Then he goes down to Ashton Genty, 81. Bunch of guys in the 70s. And so he's just a tick below the rest of the pack there. A bunch of guys at 78. He's just below them. Caleb Johnson got a respectable 75 overall grade, which for a third-round pick is pretty good. He's right there in line with a lot of the second-round graded players from Madden. And then the big surprise one, Shayne, I thought was Jack Sawyer, 72 overall grade for a fourth-round pick, was the same grade given to number 1 overall pick Cam Ward. Shayne, do you agree that Jack Sawyer and number 1 overall pick Cam Ward should have the same grade at Madden 26 release?
Well, I certainly don't. Not even because I think Cam Ward is anything, generational or anything, but because I think Jack Sawyer isn't very good. No offense to him. But I think the problem with it, and I heard some people talk about this, and this might be true, and if it is, I kind of can respect it based on what they're trying to do with like their new system with awareness and how much that matters. I think rookie quarterbacks are going to come in a lot lower than a lot of their peers, even if maybe Cam Ward probably is more talented than several players that are starting games in the NFL this year. This awareness rating is going to pull him down because they don't want rookie quarterbacks being in the same tier of guys who have been playing for several years. So I think you have to factor that in. But yes, it is very funny to think about the first overall pick being a 72 in Madden, even if it is a weaker quarterback class and a quarterback still goes number one, they normally give them a decent rating to start off. Like Madden ratings are weird in the sense that like sometimes they base the rating more on like how they kind of think a player is. Other times they base it on where they were drafted. It's a little bit weird with that. Like, so I get why Cam Ward is rated where he is based on the new system, but Jack Sawyer and him being rated the same is certainly not something I would have done. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Shayne, and the rest of their day 3 draft picks, kind of funky ratings. Dante Kent rated higher than Y.A. Black and Will Howard with a 68 grade, Y.A. Black at 67, and Will Howard at 64, which I know a lot of fans are going to be upset about that. Don't look at his throw power because that's going to discourage you a little bit. Hard to argue with some of the results there, but I mean, obviously these are subject to change and how performance they get updated weekly. We can see where these go from here. Again, take them with a grain of salt. They're just Madden.
Yeah, it's just Madden ratings, but it's always fun to kind of see where their rationale is this year. I think the thing that I was upset about is that Caleb Johnson got 88 speed. And I will say, like, you look at the 40 time, you're like, what's wrong with that? It's like, but that's not what. And I said this actually in our chat, Tom, I'm sure you saw. He should have, like, in my opinion, low 90s speed, or even as high as maybe like 93, but like 85 acceleration, right? So you don't get the burst initial with him, but you get the long speed. And I think that's something Madden doesn't always do a good job of, like, kind of putting into the game of like, well, some players are really fast, but it takes them a minute to get up to speed. And then you have the quicker than fast guys. They don't always emulate those players very well.
Yeah, and 100%. You watch his game. You can pick out any given game of him at Iowa and see he is a build-up speed guy. Once he gets to full speed, he can run away from you. But it's a matter of getting up to that full speed. It's why his 10-yard split was bad. That matches the tape. The top-end speed is not bad, though. And the explosive play rate suggests that he is kind of fast once you get out in the open field. And so I agree with that. There were some who projected him to run 4.46, 4.48 at the combine.
Looks more like that on the field.
And I agree. I think he looks closer to the high 4.4s guy than the high 4.5s guy for sure on the field. So a little bit of beef there with the speed rating of Caleb Johnson and Madden. Maybe he can prove them wrong and get a couple. I'm
sure that first like 60-yard run, they'll be like, all right, I guess we got to put it like 90.
As soon as in the first 4 weeks of the season, when he has a run longer than anything that Najee Harris has had over the last 4 years, maybe they will give him that. But we will see. All right, Shayne, let's talk Steelers training camp notes here. We don't have a ton, and this is to be expected. We're not going to be super bullish one way or the other about anything that has happened so far. We've only witnessed 4 unpadded practices. The Steelers got rained out, moved to the inside facility during their first padded practice. They're putting the pads on today, and they're on the field as we speak, as we're doing this recording right now. So if you see something big drop it in the chat for us here as we're doing this live podcast here. But let's talk about what we know so far, Shayne. And I want to start right in the defensive backfield with Jalen Ramsey, such a pivotal player for this team in 2025. Everybody was curious, and he was asked upon arrival at Steelers camp, what is your role going to be? He didn't really hint at that, as if it was going to be like this monumental surprise. And then one day later, we figure out what it is. Jalen Ramsey is playing free safety in base defense. So when there's 2 corners on the field and you got your 3-4 front, and then in nickel defense, sub-package defense, he's going to slot cornerback. This is kind of what we expected a little bit. I had made a slightly different prediction and said that maybe he would be the right cornerback in base and then slide to nickel. I don't know which one I prefer. I guess it depends on how Darius Slay performs overall compared to Juan Thornhill, and which of those guys ultimately ends up playing more snaps. Which one is it proves to be less exposed maybe in that defense. Slay in his own age. Do I trust that more than Thornhill's coming after 2 really shaky seasons with the Browns? I mean, I'd still probably prefer Slay on the field, but I also would prefer Ramsey as a full-time cornerback. I don't know how I feel about him playing safety for 25-30% of the snaps and then slot cornerback. I want him around the ball.
I think it's the issue is, like, ideally, I'd rather have him play more outside corner at times because that's what he's mostly done in his career. And I know at this point in his career, maybe playing in the slot is better for him overall. And some of his best seasons have included his most slot usage. So the slot usage isn't really the issue, but I do think him playing free safety and base, it just we haven't seen it, right? And we haven't really obviously seen what this team looks like with Minkah Fitzpatrick not playing free safety for how long. So maybe it's a moot point at that point. But I do wonder, if Darius Slay is actually a good player still, right? Which for someone like him is hard to say that, but like he is 34. You don't know exactly what you're going to get from him, but assuming he's at least 95% of what he was last year for the Eagles, just on like in terms of what he looks like on the field, I do expect him to be the better player to have out there than a Juan Thornhill or Chuck Clark or whoever ends up being that like de facto other safety next to Elliott when it's not Ramsey, right? So I think they have the right idea initially, but you have to kind of hope that they're right about it, because if that isn't the right setup and Darius can't be out there, it gets dicey really fast at corner, especially if Ramsey were to go down or something like that. So we'll have to see.
Shayne, I am a firm believer that great football players can make it work.
Yes.
Wherever you put them. I really do. Like I've argued before that I think that if back in the Wisconsin Badgers, Shayne, if TJ Watt would have played tight end, he probably could have been a really good NFL tight end. He would have had worked his body a different way than he does right now to try to gain more speed as opposed to power. But great football players are going to find a way to make an impact. I believe that's true with Jalen Ramsey, even though he's going to be, like Watt, turned 31 years old in October. Here's my biggest issue with this, Shayne. Do you know how many snaps he had at free safety last year? One snap at free safety. And so experience does play a factor, I feel like. In comparison, he played 728 snaps as a boundary cornerback and 185 snaps in the slot. That's in addition to 80 snaps from the box, which are essentially you're still that nickel. You're running nickel there. 33 snaps as actually on the defensive line, sometimes as a blitzer, sometimes dropping back. That's the role that I want to see him in. I prefer to say right cornerback, slide inside when the Steelers are in nickel or dime defense. I'm a little bit skeptical of the Steelers' game plan with this, but I do think it gets the better collection of players on the field. I do firmly believe that Darius Slay, even in his old age, 34 years old, is better than Juan Thornhill. I have my reserves about Slay because Slay is the third oldest cornerback in the NFL, according to PFF's database. He's the second oldest cornerback on an NFL roster, and he's the oldest cornerback in the league that's projected to be a starter this year, the oldest in the league by 2 years over the next highest player, because Stephon Gilmore is not currently under contract with anybody. And so these guys just fall off so fast. You can look at any of the cornerbacks over the years. A lot of these guys that were like legendary corners, like Charles Woodson, had to change to safety late in their career. Darrelle Revis was toast by 30 years old. And Slay is running on borrowed time. So I do worry about him as well. We could have a whole conversation about that cornerback shelf life. Like there's a ton of evidence to that. Thankfully the Steelers have good cornerback depth. And if they cut Corey Trice for whatever reason, I'm going to be fuming because you just can't trust what you're getting out of Slay, despite giving him the 1 year, $10 million contract. But I'm interested. I'm intrigued by the game plan for Ramsey, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think the last thing kind of to note on this, and this obviously goes back to when Ramsey was in the draft, but there was a lot of people who said maybe he's a safety, and I think a lot of that was the size and speed combination. It's like, well, maybe he could use that more at safety than he could at corner. Obviously, ends up becoming an all-pro corner. It all works out for him, but there's a reason for that. Like he has the size, he has the playmaking instincts, the ball skills, like all of the things to be a great safety are there. And I don't think he necessarily has to play there. I don't think that's why you play him there. But I think for the Steelers defense, if you don't have him as a safety sometimes, and as much as I like Deshaun Elliott, there's no playmaking in the back end if he's not out there as a safety. Like Thornhill's not a playmaker at this point, especially. Elliott's much more of a playmaker in the run game and in the short area of the field. If you don't have him back there at times, you're probably going to have very little opportunities to make big plays. That Minkah used to do and hasn't done recently, so maybe it's kind of whatever, but that might be their way of solving that problem, is by having him play there sometimes.
Yeah, Shayne, I think that's my fear, though. The fact that Minkah has been so quiet these past two seasons, one interception since the end of the 2022 season, is Ramsey going to fall into that same Steelers defensive trap where it's like everything is quick passing game, 10 to 15 yards. His impact is negated because playing deep safety, playing cover 2 safety, you're just not around the ball as much as you should be. If anything, I'd almost argue that you should play strong safety, but obviously you're not going to do that because Elliott's coming off of a really good year, right? I want him around the ball, and I think that the best way to do that is play him as a full-time cornerback, boundary and slot. We'll see how this works out. And the good thing is you can't be less ball productive than Minka's been these past 37 games or whatever it's been.
Right.
So we'll go from there and see how this continues to unfold. Shayne, I want to talk about another one of our training camp notes, and that's the wide receiver position. I feel really confident in saying that the receiver depth, at least at the top, has already shaken out. And I don't think there's going to be a change up here, barring a significant injury. It's DK as your clear and obvious wide receiver 1. Aaron Rodgers has made that very clear by targeting him heavily in the early 5 practices of training camp. Calvin Austin is the clear number 2 receiver. And in 11 personnel, Austin's going to slide inside and Roman Wilson is going to be your Z receiver. This is what we wanted. This is what we were hoping for. You want the young guys to get on the field. I didn't see hardly any upside in rolling with a Robert Woods, 33 years old, out there after having 200 yards and change over the past 2 seasons each year. He's had his time in the sun already. You have to look forward and hope that Roman Wilson can get it. We're going to talk more about him in just a second, but are you surprised to see the receiver roles shake out the way that they did, or was this something you were expecting?
A part of me is a little surprised just because we know how much this team loves a washed-up wide receiver 2. I mean, they just love it, you know. They love that. And
you could go back years, man.
Literally, years at this point. They even had a couple last year, ultimately. But at the end of the day, I think this is kind of how we all expected it to shake out at some point. Maybe not this early, but I think until Roman Wilson gets a chance to actually get on the field and show what he can do, I think he's kind of stuck at receiver 3. I don't know if there's much he can do to unseat Austin, who did have a productive year last year, and I do think is just better equipped to kind of handle that for now. But the hope, I think, for both of us especially, and probably for Steelers fans as well, considering Austin is in a contract year, you want Roman Wilson to eventually be the second targeted receiver in this offense. Like, that's, I think, kind of the main goal for any of those who are fans of this team, is you want to see that happen at some point.
Yeah, and if anybody's sitting here wondering right now, why not play Robert Woods? If Robert Woods is the better option, I'll tell you why, and it's really simple, because even if Robert Woods is 5 to 10% better than Wilson right now, you need to have Roman Wilson must be better than Woods by the end of the season. If he's not, your team's in trouble anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Woods is going down. Wilson should be arrow pointing up. What happened with Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Mike Williams? When you play receivers that are washed up, that can't create separation, that are already past their prime, there's literally no upside in doing that. And so you have to hope that the guy that you put your faith in as a 3rd round pick, the guy that was 46th overall player on the NFL Draft Expert Consensus Board, who the Steelers supposedly got a steal on, you need to see this guy on the field and hope that he can develop into a quality wide receiver 3, maybe even a number 2 wide receiver for the Steelers by the end of the year. We'll see how that goes. I want to table the Roman Wilson talk for just a second here. And we'll talk about some standout rookies at camp as well, Shayne. And some of the most notable names are the big guys on the defensive line, Y.A. Black and Derek Harmon. Black's got his hands up, batted a few passes during a Steelers training camp practice, showed off a little bit of juice there, chasing down the run. Shayne, both you and I, we're just left pondering, like, why is Y.A. Black a defensive end in Steelers 3-4 front? When it was reported he was as heavy as 352 pounds this offseason. Recent reports say 336, which is kind of what he came into at the NFL Combine. I don't know what he weighs this way. These days, I'd like somebody to ask him.
Yeah.
But I can tell you a guy that's much smaller than him, Logan Lee, is playing nose tackle. And so I wrote an article recently where I talked about all these young defensive linemen potentially being played out of position, and I just don't get it. But it's good to know that regardless of where he's lining up on the defensive line, Y.A. Black, a 5th round pick here, is still making plays.
Yeah, like, it's definitely good that he's playing well. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be upset about that. Obviously, I'm not insane. But again, like, you go back to the roles and the usages of these players. Logan Lee is not a nose tackle. He's not. I don't
281 pounds at the
and I don't
combine
even
is what
care
he
what
was,
he
by the
weighs
way.
at this point. He's not that type of player. It doesn't matter. He could be 350 pounds. He's not built like that. He's not going to be good weight. So it doesn't even matter if he's bulked up. There's no way he bulked up enough to be a nose tackle. So I don't know if there's some sort of like weird experiment they're doing with like maybe nose tackles should actually be like 290 pounds and they should like knife in. It's like, no, everyone knows there's certain things about football that like everyone kind of understands and there isn't much real debate about. One of those things is that nose tackles should probably be stout at the point of attack, right? They don't have that except for probably YA Black, at least guys that you want playing that position. You don't want Cam Hayward doing that all the time. You certainly don't want Keanu Benson except for the Steelers once and two. But they just don't do it, and I still don't understand why. I really like. There's no clear reasoning that I can figure out from what they've said or what they've done.
Shayne, it feels like such common sense. Like the last great nose tackle you had was an enormous man in Casey Hampton,
for sure.
Very stout at the point of attack. Now, obviously, the game has changed a lot over the last 20 years, but what does a nose tackle still have to do, especially in a 3-4 front? You've got to take on double team blocks, and you're talking about 650 to 700 pounds of guard and center that you're taking on a lot of times simultaneously. Why would you ask a 285, 290 pound player to do that? I don't know. I just don't know what they do. And we talk about Keanu Benton too. I mean, a little off topic here. We can go down another rabbit hole, but Benton is a player that you watched heavily, Shayne, during his college career at Wisconsin. You're a Wisconsin guy. We watched him in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. What does he do best? He shoots the B gap and penetrates because he's nimble footed. He's agile. He's bendy. What is he not great at? Holding up at the point of attack and taking on double team blocks. What are the Steelers asking him to do? The latter. And I just don't understand how you don't recognize the strengths and weaknesses of the guys up front and get them in the best positions to succeed. I think that is one area where Terry Lawson, Mike Tomlin have fallen short. Carl Dunbar, you got to recognize this. DeMarvin Leal, we can talk all day about him. Why is he playing as an edge? I mean, don't draft the guy if you think that he's an edge, because I could have told you from day one, he's Taco Charlton as an edge. He's just not fast enough to play there, and he needs to be a penetrating interior defensive lineman if he wants to have any success in the NFL. I don't know what they were doing there. Anyway, all that's to say, going back to these rookies here, I feel like Harmon and YA Black have done a good job from everything that we've heard so far. Harmon in terms of getting pressure, quick pressure on the quarterback. Black in terms of getting his hands up and chasing down the running back a few times, which he's obviously not known for his athletic traits. I would venture a guess, Shayne, that as the pads are coming on now, that both of these guys should look even better with their size and length and strength profile, should look even better moving forward.
Yeah. And again, like Harmon has been kind of everything I hoped he would look like so far, which is great. You definitely want to see him, start off quickly. And again, like maybe YA Black's going to be a really good defensive end for us. Maybe he is going to be that guy that can move up and down the line a little bit. But if he is, it's not because he profiled that way, right? Like in my opinion, no offense to Steelers, especially with how they've handled defensive line situations, I'm going to say they got lucky if he's good at that position. Like I know it's like, oh, they saw something. It's like maybe they did, but the way they've been doing this, I'm not going to give them credit for that, right? I just can't. Like they've been too weird about their defensive line rotation and how they do it. So hopefully he's plays well wherever he plays, but I do ultimately hope he settles in at nose tackle if he does play significant snaps for us.
Shayne, I agree with you there. Let's get to this comment. Saw Terry McLaurin jersey on the Pat McAfee show today. That's in St. Vincent, at St. Vincent College for training camp. That's optimistic. Whoever that fan was there, I don't think it's happening, but boy, that would be kind of fun. Yeah, Terry McLaurin to the Knicks.
Hey, why not at this point?
Yeah. Shayne, let's move on. And I want to talk about the toughest early training camp battles. And we're gonna keep it to the toughest battles right now, the deepest positions, because we're so early in this process. We could go through and try to dissect every position. We don't know that much yet because, like I said, the pads have just recently come on. So let's talk about some of the biggest and toughest battles here. And let's keep the focus right on the defensive line here. So what we know, Steelers typically keep 6 interior down defensive linemen, sometimes 7, depending on the depth of the team. And then that can be shifted. That 7th guy can be shifted early in the season if the depth is needed elsewhere. But let's think about it. They keep 6 like they often do here. The guys that you're going to have considered roster locks right now, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, those are the guys that aren't going anywhere. After that, I would say that it's Daniel Uquale as the 4th because the Steelers gave him that contract. He was a starter last year on the Patriots. He's got the veteran experience, can play some nose tackle. It looks like right now, at least based on the early snaps, the plan is for him to be the backup nose tackle to Keanu Benton here. And then after that, Shayne, you have Y.A. Black, the 5th round pick this year that we've just recently talked about. And then a cluster of guys, Isaiah Loudermilk, DeMarvin Leal. What in the world are you doing with that guy? Is he still an edge rusher? Is he a guy that you would consider keeping around because of his edge D-line versatility? Logan Lee, who landed on IR during his rookie season, but we're still talking about a 6th round pick. I think he was the 178th overall pick in the draft, a guy that was athletic yet undersized, which interestingly is playing nose tackle. Yeah. Dean Lowry, the veteran, can he stick around a year? That's really the cluster there. And then Ezidi Autumn Maywo, I always butcher that name. Some tools to work with. I think he's the only other guy in the mix. Steelers signed Dominique Davis. They got Jacob Slade. I don't give those guys much of a chance. Just try to be realistic with it. But the cluster is big enough as it is already for that 6th and final spot. And you're talking about 4 dogs, 1 bone situation here.
It's tough because I think going into this, you assumed that Y.A. Black would be closer to the roster level just because he's a 5th round pick and there's so many guys in this room. But I think he's played his way probably onto the roster already. Like the way they're using him, especially, and the amount of snaps he's gotten, like he seems to be a guy they really have plans for. So you throw him in there, like you said, 5th guy. It gets strange because would you rather have a Logan Lee who has a little bit more upside than the rest of this group, has more athleticism, but again, you're playing him about as out of position as you can play somebody on the defensive line, in my opinion, which whatever, maybe they have a thought for that, opposed to the kind of usuals, right? Like Isaiah Loudermilk, I could do without it. I've said this for a while, no offense to him, as a Wisconsin fan, like you said, never really got that with that one, but whatever. Dean Lowry is a veteran, but he's very much a veteran and hasn't been an impact for quite some time. And again, DeMarvin Leal, I don't know where they categorize him. Like, because especially if he's categorized as like an edge, then he's certainly not making the roster because they're not keeping 5 edge rushers. And if he's categorized as a defensive lineman or maybe both, like you said, he's not been good at either one when he has played. So I don't really see the point at this. Like, I'd rather just let him go find another opportunity. So it kind of feels like Logan Lee is the answer right now because of the combination of upside and the fact they're moving him around. But it is still hard to say. My guess that would be Lee at this moment in time.
Yeah, Shayne, I want to go back to Y.A. Black for a second here. We're very familiar with all these guys. We watched obviously the guys on the roster for years. We watch a ton of these draft picks. I'm convinced already that Y.A. Black is the 2nd biggest, strongest, and longest defensive tackle on the team next to Cameron Hayward. That right there in itself is enough reason for me to keep him on the team. The Steelers had a miserable time trying to stop Derrick Henry, trying to stop the running game, particularly late in the season last year and into the playoffs. You need a guy that can hold up at the point of attack. We know that is his specialty. We saw that at Iowa. That should continue in the NFL. He's got an enormous frame. We're talking like a 99th percentile frame here, 35-inch arms, huge wingspan, 336, 340 pounds, whatever he's weighing at these days. He has the frame to do that. He has the strength to do that. And that's why, going back to it, I wrote an article. I think he's actually more of a roster lock than even what Will Howard is. As much as Will Howard gets talked about as that 3rd quarterback, I think they both make the roster at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For draft picks, they have the upper hand.
Yeah.
But I think that the Steelers are going to recognize just how much stronger he is than Isaiah Loudermilk, how much stronger he is than Logan Lee. And that's going to be enough incentive right there to lock up that 5th spot on the defensive line, leaving the 6th spot, I think, to be battled between Loudermilk, Lee, Lowry, and possibly Leal. And if they're viewing Leal as an edge, I think his chances of making the roster are even worse because I can't see the Steelers giving up on Jack Sawyer. You just drafted him in the 4th round. They appear to be high on him. Yeah. They took an edge, which wasn't a big positional need just because they liked Sawyer so much. Like there's just no chance unless an injury occurs there that there's a position for him there. He would have to make it based on being a guy who can play some edge, some defensive line. And heck, Shayne, we might even be talking about the 6th guy in this team that makes the 6th guy that makes the defensive line group. They may need to be athletic enough to run down kicks, because if you're looking where the Steelers have kept extra depth, they got cornerbacks who aren't going to play special teams. We know that. Like they got like 4-ish cornerbacks who aren't going to play special teams. They got Jonnu Smith, an extra tight end who also doesn't play special teams. They've added players to the roster who won't play teams, and that means they need other guys that can play teams. And maybe if DeMarvin Leal is the best of the group on special teams, maybe he gets it. If Logan Lee can run down on kick coverage, maybe he gets it. So that's I'm going to make an early prediction and say that's where they are going to look. That 6th spot may be determined by which one of these guys can play special teams.
Yeah, and that's usually that's what happens. Like when you are that far down the depth chart, or even sometimes not that far down the depth chart, you have to be able to play special teams in the NFL. And I think personally Lee's probably the best fit for that. Again, I still kind of lean him, but Leal could also potentially do that. It's just, again, we're talking about the 6th defensive line spot. I'm not sure how much it's going to impact the team, but I would still probably give Lee the edge if we're doing it today.
Now, I wouldn't be shocked, Shayne, because of the depth that they have here, the experience they have, if one of these guys was picked up by another squad. We've seen that before. Carlton Davis, the recent example, Isaiah Buggs. Like they've in recent years, the Steelers have had guys that didn't make their roster, or maybe made their roster initially, then they were cut, and then they were quickly scooped up by opposing teams. That would not surprise me, but you got to cut back somewhere. I don't know if it's worth reserving a 7th defensive line spot for an Isaiah Loudermilk. Like the talent doesn't justify that still. I think if anything, we talk about the cornerback room, where we're going to get to here in a second, that might be more deserving of keeping an extra roster spot. Let's talk about the linebacker battle going on right now. And when I say linebacker, I'm not talking about 3-4 outside linebacker. I'm talking about off-ball linebacker in the NFL here. And this is going to be tightly contested. We got a strong group overall. I would say the top 2 guys are clearly locks in Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson. Malik Harrison, I would consider a lock as well. The Steelers gave him a 2-year contract, gave him good money. I think that Cole Holcomb should have a spot on this team, assuming that now that the pads are on, I heard he's not wearing that leg sleeve as far as today's practice goes. He's looking healthy, looking rearing to go. I think he should get one of those spots here. And then you've got Mark Robinson, Carson Bruner. Shayne, how many linebackers do you think the Steelers keep, and who do you think is going to be the odd man out?
So I think that they're going to keep 5, and with that 5th guy mostly for special teams, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think the top 4 are the top 4, assuming Cole is healthy and he's able to play. I think he's going to be the 3rd actual linebacker, with maybe Harrison playing more of that run defense role or whatever. But the semantics are there. So you have your top 2 guys, obviously, with Quinn and Wilson, Holcomb. You have Harrison. I think it's going to be Bruner, I would guess, is the 5th guy drafted this year. He's rookie. He has more time left on his deal, obviously, than a Mark Robinson does. He has ties to organization with his dad. Like, I think that just makes too much sense. And I do think he'll make the roster for special teams value, because this is an athletic player, not a bigger player, but most linebackers aren't big anymore anyway, so that's not really a big concern anyway. And I think he just has more ability to maybe eventually crack the lineup even for defense a little bit more than Mark Robinson has shown at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. Everything that you just said right there. Mark Robinson has been a tone setter at time for special teams for Pittsburgh, but it makes sense to go with the guy that's more athletic, the guy that's the more recent draft pick, got more years left on the contract, is less proven, and ideally has more upside, maybe can be a guy that actually gets on the field at some point, though he's obviously very buried on the depth chart right now. He's going to have to make his bread on special teams. So we'll see how that shakes out. It's going to be one of those 2 guys for the final spot. And I agree that they're only going to keep 5 as they typically do. Shayne, I think the change this year to last year is in 2024, they rotated a lot of Atlanta Roberts, Peyton Wilson. Now with Roberts gone, and Roberts had a really good season as that downhill thumper, that Vince Williams type linebacker. This year, I think you're going to see almost 2 full-time linebackers in Wilson and Queen, with Malik Harrison coming on the field, maybe in early downs, rundowns, maybe some Cole Holcomb mixed in there as well. Obviously, I'd prefer to see Cole Holcomb. I think that if he's pre-knee injury Cole Holcomb, he deserves to be the third guy on the field and rotate in semi-heavily to keep the other guys fresh. But at the end of the day, if things keep going the way that they have been based on 2024, I want to see Wilson as the guy that earns the top snaps on the team. Obviously, he has an injury history. You don't want to put him in harm's way more than you need to, but he's the guy that I'm optimistic about. He just said that he thinks he's the best coverage linebacker in the game. He's going to be out to prove it. So he's the guy that I'm really bullish on this year.
Yeah, and like I've said this before, like if Holcomb's healthy, he definitely deserves to play, and I think he's the second best linebacker on the team if he's healthy. I still think that if the knee is good and he can move well and do all that stuff, he's probably a more impactful overall player than what Queen is, realistically. So you hope that he's healthy enough to kind of mix in there, and I do still think that I bet that Queen outsnaps everyone just because of the combination of experience and the contract and everything else. But Wilson should hopefully be closer to matching that this year if he can make sure the run defense is good for him and that the coverage continues to be, honestly, maybe even better than last year, which he was one of the top guys in the league last year, like in a snap-by-snap basis. So.
Yeah, and a really interesting stat that was, again, thrown out while Peyton Wilson was speaking to the media. Was that today? Just today or yesterday?
I believe it was yesterday.
It was just yesterday. Yesterday. I think he was speaking to the media, and he was talking about how Queen never missed a defensive snap for the team last year. He also mentioned how gassed he was, huffing and puffing, when he was let out of the game. And so it makes you wonder, like, why was he on the field 100% of the time? I know he's a green dot wearer. That obviously has a big part to do with it.
It does.
But you had Peyton Wilson. You had a young Peyton Wilson sitting there performing really well when he did see the field, saw a fraction as many snaps as Patrick Queen. Maybe get him more involved. There's no doubt that he will be this year. Now it's a matter of, is it going to be full-time Queen and Wilson? Are you going to still take Wilson off the field and spell him of some snaps for Malik Harrison or Cole Holcomb? It's a really interesting positional group because they are deep, and I think they have the potential to be really good at the top because I truly think the sky is the limit for Peyton Wilson in year 2. He just has such a good feel for the game, tremendous athlete, good size. He's got the whole package going for him there. All right, Shayne, let's talk about the cornerback room really quickly before we talk about the Steelers who will make or break the 2025 season. Cornerbacks here, it's you don't say this often about a Steelers cornerback room, but this is suddenly maybe the deepest position on the entire team. Like,
certainly
they've got like seven strong here at cornerback, or at least guys that if they don't make the roster could very well make another team's roster this year. We rarely talk about the cornerback in this light. And Shayne, just last year, we were looking at a situation where James Pierre had to start games for the Steelers because Corey Trice missed an 11-game stretch in the middle of the season. Dante Jackson missed a few games. Not that he was consistent when he played. He had the takeaways. Beanie Bishop was obviously forced into a major role as an undrafted rookie cornerback playing that starting slot corner position. Now you don't have any of those things going on. The Steelers added Darius Slay. They made the blockbuster trade for Jalen Ramsey. Corey Trice is now suddenly your 4th cornerback, and I certainly hope he's at least your cornerback 4. Like I don't want him any lower on the depth chart than that. I think that there's too much to be optimistic about with the games that he played last year, assuming he can stay healthy this season. You still have Beanie Bishop coming into year 2. You'd think he would be better. You have Brandon Echols, who the Steelers signed to a 2-year contract. They've got high hopes for him. He seems like a roster lock because you typically don't give a guy a 2-year contract if he's not going to make the team. And so we're looking really crowded here, and you still have James Pierre, who, even though you don't want him to see the field, Shayne, he is a really good special teams gunner. He was that gunner alongside Ben Skoranek, in the pairing of them were very strong for Pittsburgh last year. How do you see the cornerback battle shaping up at Steelers training camp? Who do you think ends up getting the axe here and when it's all said and done?
It's tough because, like, from all accounts, and granted, we haven't been there. We've only seen what we've been able to see from videos and what people down there have reported. And I am hoping to get out there next week sometime after I have a wedding coming up. But after that, I'm going to try to get out there. But all the corners seem to be playing pretty well. So it's like, I don't know if anyone's really separating themselves in a necessarily good or bad way. Like, I know that Eccles has been mentioned a lot, having some plays. Trice is still out there doing good stuff. Dante Kent, I've even heard some good things about too, and he might be a guy that, like, just simply is going to be the odd man out, just from a numbers game perspective. I think the problem is it comes down to one, like, do they keep an extra guy here or something? Like, do they even keep 7 guys? Like, do they say, well, let's just use some of these spots for special teams? That's kind of, I think, the question. But Kent has a long way to go to get onto this roster just because of all the depth there. But he could bring special teams value. They're still trying to sort out who's going to return kicks and stuff like that. The punt return is seemingly still Austin, which makes sense because he had a good year last year. But so that factors that into play. James Pierre, as good as a special teamer as he is, like, I don't want him out on defense. So does that impact, like, who makes the roster at the back end? It's tough with this corner.
Let's map this out real quick, Shayne, because in the past they've kept 5 corners. I don't see that happen. They're going to keep 6, maybe
at
7.
Least 6.
And I in my latest roster prediction, I said 7 because if you're really looking at where the talent and the depth is on this team, cornerback is one of those positions, and the guys near the bottom of that depth can give you special teams ability. And so I would almost reserve an additional spot for the cornerback room. But let's map this out really quick. You got Jalen Ramsey, Joey Porter, Darius Slay. Those are your roster locks. That makes 3 right there. I think personally, Corey Trice Jr. should be next in line of that group. There's too much talent there. I think he could be the team's dime backer this year, assuming he's healthy. He had some tremendous flashes when he played last year. His coverage grade was almost identical to what Jalen Ramsey and Slay put together last year, which Slay was a starting corner for a Super Bowl team, and Ramsey graded out as a top 11 corner in the league. So I would put Trice there, number 4, and then you've got Beanie Bishop, Brandon Eccles. That's 5, 6. James Pierre, 7. Dante Kent, 8. Like, there's just not a chance that you keep that many. Potentially 2 of these guys are gone. And like I said, if you keep 7 corners, then at least 1 is still gone. I think that Kent has a tremendously difficult battle being a non-power 4 MAC conference cornerback here, coming into a situation where there's already guys that have a niche role, right? The Trice has got size, versatility, athleticism. Pierre's got the special teams ability. Beanie Bishop has now the year starting experience as a slot cornerback. There's guys ahead of him with roles. Brandon Eccles, the veteran, coming in 4 years on the Jets. So I think that he is certainly the odd man out. And if there's 2 players that are the odd men out right now, Shayne, who's the other?
I do think it's either Bishop or Pierre. I think it's one of those 2. And I think, honestly, with Dante Kent, like, his path to the roster is 2 things. One, it's, can he beat out Bishop as, like, a slot guy that could be one of the backup slot options behind Ramsey? Because again, Bishop may have a year of experience, but he was an undrafted free agent. Like, had even less draft pedigree than Kent has. So I don't think it's impossible that he could beat him out. But if he can't, the only other option is you got to be the kick returner for this team. Like, you have to show that you're clearly the best return specialist on the team and is worthy of a roster spot. And maybe that's the path to them keeping 7 more so than just keeping a guy solely because, like, James Pierre Gunner situation, right? So I think it's still very likely that both Kent and Pierre are gone here in this situation. But I think if they were to keep one of those 2, Kent feels like the option that might have the best chance.
Yeah, and I agree. I think those bottom 2 guys are going to have to play special teams. My early roster prediction, like I said, I'm going against the grain. I'm going against all historic Steelers trends and saying 7 cornerbacks because we just talked about 8, and already one of those guys is an odd man out. If you're truly looking at where the depth is, 7 to me is the magic number. But now that the Steelers just signed Chuck Clark to play safety, I had them cutting back at safety before. I don't know if that'll be the case now. And so it's to me, if I had to guess, I'm leaning back towards 6 cornerbacks again, which unfortunately means that between Bishop, Dante Kent, James Pierre, and possibly even Corey Trice, and I hate to say that, he's not a roster lock, even though I'm a big believer in the talent if he can stay on the field. All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain Podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain Podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all your support. All right, Shayne, let's talk about 4 young players. I just wrote an article on this, going to come out soon. 4 young players who could make or break the Steelers' 2025 season. Now, we know what TJ Watt's going to offer. We know what Cam Hayward's going to offer. We've got a good idea of who Jalen Ramsey is, of who Aaron Rodgers is. But I want to talk about 4 unproven NFL players and how important they could potentially be to the Steelers this season, potentially even into the postseason if they make it there, Shayne. And the first on the list, excuse me, is Roman Wilson, the wide receiver. We touched on him a little bit already. Calvin Austin, we know, is firmly in that wide receiver 2 spot, but Wilson is going to be the team's starting receiver in 11 personnel. And we know that that still is a heavy personnel grouping for Pittsburgh. What do you think that he brings to the table this year? And what does he have to show at training camp to prove to be that guy that they can rely on? Because there is no other option. You can't go back to Robert Woods. You have to hope that Roman Wilson gets it.
I think the things that he has to show and the things that I think he can do and will hopefully show for this team is probably number one for Aaron Rodgers, especially, is reliability. This is a guy who did not drop the football at Michigan, especially his last year there. He was an absolute demon in the slot because of it. It was very hard to stay with him, especially for slot corners at the college level. And I think his combination of his separation ability and his ability to catch the football, despite being a smaller player, is kind of what made him the 46th prospect on the consensus rankings. Like, having a guy like that as a slot weapon, especially, and I think he can play outside a little bit, but I think the slot is still his best role. That's where he can make an impact, because you did not get that from this football team last year, and you haven't gotten it for a while from a true slot receiver, right? So that's how he can make his mark, and I think how he can get Aaron Rodgers on the same page as him and get him to target him is by showing, like, on third down, if you throw me the football and it gets to me, I'm going to catch it, right? Like, I'm going to be in a position to get the first down to keep the chains moving. That's something, again, that Calvin Austin isn't necessarily built to do because he is even smaller and doesn't have the catch radius and things like that. And then DK Metcalf is much more the big play threat, right? That's where Wilson's niche can be this year. And then you hope he can continue to develop into a more high volume target moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about one of the most sure-handed receivers in college football in 2024 and 2023. What season was that?
Yeah, 2020. It was 2020.
Got my years mixed up there. One drop.
Feels like he's a rookie.
It feels like he essentially redshirt, played 5 snaps for the Steelers offensively last year, and then got another soft tissue injury. But you go back to that 2023 season in Michigan, 1 drop on 67 targets. That's a 2.3% drop rate. And his hands are soft. They're natural. I'd like to see that continue, obviously, with the Steelers. You'd hope that this isn't a player that gets a case of the drops, because historically he's been a sure-handed receiver. And you combine that with a guy that's explosive after the line of scrimmage, a guy that runs sub 4.4. You hope that he can separate, improve his route running, and eventually be that guy that can win in one-on-one situations as an outside receiver. If he can do that, then the Steelers will be sitting pretty here.
I think ultimately with him, if he can catch you like 50 balls for like 600 some yards and pick up a bunch of first downs this year, I think you're happy with that. Like, I think that's kind of what you hope you can get out of him. And then you can get most of the production from DK still at receiver. Austin will have his moments with gadget stuff and big plays. But he needs to be the guy, because I don't think anyone else, except for one of the tight ends maybe, because we know they're going to use the tight ends. And that's what complicates this whole kind of setup as far as how much he's going to play, even if he is the third receiver. But I think if you can get that level of production out of him in an offense that isn't going to be heavily based on the pass, that probably means that he could be a piece for you moving forward.
All right, Shayne, let's move on and talk about the next player of the 4 on the list of young guys who can make or break the Steelers 2025 season. That is Broderick Jones. And we've got to have a conversation about Broderick Jones. I'm going to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I try to lean that way. There were some very ugly reps before the pads came on. One against Nick Herbig, one against Alex Highsmith from all the reporting down at St. Vincent College for camp. The guy has got to improve. He's back on the left side where we assumed he wanted to be. It's where he played at Georgia. It's what got him drafted 14th overall by the Steelers. Really took his lumps with the team last year, looked just downright dismal at times, turned things around in the second half of the season. The Steelers gave him a little bit more help on that side. Now he's back at the left side and had a few ugly moments already in camp. The pads are on now. We hope to see that improve, and we need to see it improve because he is the guy this team invested in. He's supposed to be the left tackle of the future. That's what Omar Khan wanted. It's Omar Khan's first ever draft pick, and a lot's going to be riding on his success. And secondly, Shayne, the Steelers have horrendously bad offensive tackle depth. You're talking about Calvin Anderson, Dylan Cook after that. Two guys you should never have to call up into a starting situation. You don't even have the Chuck Okorafor type of player that can enter the starting lineup if need be. They don't have that guy on the team right now. So not only do they need Jones to stay healthy, they need him to be good for the sake of this offense.
And at this point with him too, and like there's plenty of excuses you can make for him, right? Like you talk about how the coaching staff has stunted his development by moving him to right tackle and then not playing him last year until Fatani goes down and he has to go play right tackle. And this we could talk about that all day, right? At some point though, when you were the athlete he was coming out of Georgia, when you were the level of prospect he was coming out of Georgia, if you can't show that you are at least a average starting tackle in year 3 at either side, right? And at this point, you can't really care about the flipping side of the situation. Then he's just not going to be the tackle for this team. Like he's not going to be one of the guys for the future. And they desperately want him, and we're going to talk about Fatani in a second here. They desperately want these two to be the bookend tackles for, the next however many years. We don't know yet with Troy because he hasn't gotten a chance to prove it. We'll talk about him again, like I said. But Jones has gotten chances to play, and a lot of them. And so far, the good is certainly outweighed by the bad for the most part. And I talked about this when I did an article recently about his struggles and him having to get back on the field and prove that he can play. With offensive line, unlike skill positions and even quarterback to some degree, depending on the level of good that you get from them, it is much better for an offensive tackle to be good almost all the time, but maybe never great, than it is for them to be great some of the time, but bad more often. Like you cannot be bad consistently at tackle or you will lose games. Like you simply won't be able to field an offense if you're bad mostly at tackle. And that's what he's been.
Yeah, Shayne, that's kind of been the story of his career. We've seen highlight moments. The highlight moments are not the issue.
Yeah,
in run blocking, we've seen Broderick Jones take out 2 guys, clear a massive lane. But it's the low moments. It's the egregious penalties. It's the being laid off the ball, sloppy technique, getting run over, whatever it is. That's the stuff that really hurts your team. Those are drive killers. And like you said, you'd rather be consistent rather than have the flashy plays. The flashy plays don't mean anything as a tackle if you don't have consistency. That is the issue. Now, fortunately, we're talking about Broderick Jones going to be entering this season in only a second ever game at left tackle. The hope is that the more he plays there, the better he can get. You better see an upward trajectory of this guy by the second half of the season. If you don't, there's going to be legitimate concerns. And we're going to be talking about whether the Steelers need to go out and draft another tackle high next year. And that's a conversation we don't want to have. There's also the talk about his physique going on recently and the fact that he looks trimmer. I mean, he admitted he was down 15 to 20 pounds from his playing weight last year. A lot of people speculate that he was in the 305 range during off-season team activities. And Mark Bally recently said that he looks as trim as like 285 pounds. I'm not buying that he's that.
I don't believe that.
But there is a picture. There is a picture going around of him next to Stephen Jones, Steelers offensive lineman, who, to be fair, weighs 340, 345. He's a big guy, but Jones looks half as trim. I mean, he looks like a tight end. So it's hard to say what he's weighing in at. You don't want to, there's a certain point you don't want to drop below. Like you don't want to be a sub 300-pound tackle. You need size and strength still. You don't want to compromise your strength to get a little bit quicker. I think a lot of it is a technique issue. He should have everything. When you look at his athletic profile, he should have everything. You go back and watch the way he moved at the NFL Combine. He should have the foot quickness to be able to do that stuff. There's just some plays where it feels like he doesn't.
Yeah, the problem with, and the reason why guys like him go early, why you have to draft toolsy tackles early, is because those are the guys that when they figure it all out, turn into the Lane Johnsons of the world and the Trent Williams of the world. Like the true freaks at tackle, whenever they hit, whenever they figure it all out, it's almost impossible to beat them because now you're quicker than some guys that are 260 pounds rushing after you. You're gigantic in most cases. Like all that matters a ton. But I think with Broderick at this point, part of it is probably his development and the fact they moved him to right tackle at first and the whole thing. But he just doesn't have, like you said, the technique aspect down. Like he can move when he wants to, when he's comfortable and when he's confident with what he's doing. You could tell the reps, he's like, oh, I know this play. Like I know exactly what I'm supposed to do here. This when he, again, takes two people out in road grades and run blocking or whatever. When he doesn't feel confident about it, or when you could tell that he isn't comfortable with his technique, that's when you get the holding penalties or the just absolutely getting blown off the ball situations. And like, it just has to get better. Like it doesn't matter what's happened to him at this point. He kind of has to go into it and be like, I'm playing for my job in the NFL right now. Yep. Like some team will give him an opportunity if it doesn't work out here, but probably not as a starter. And he's going to have to work his way back up if he doesn't figure it out this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about his counterpart here over at right tackle, Troy Fautanu, a guy who is less proven than Broderick even somehow because he has one NFL start. He was the first round pick of the Steelers last year, ended up having season-ending knee surgery after just week 1 of the season. And so Fautanu still has a lot to prove. Now, I'm more optimistic about Fautanu because I've seen less of him, and that's a good thing in this case because what I've seen of Jones is a lot more discouraging for the most part. I was encouraged by what I saw with Fautanu, but it's such a small sample. It's truly hard to go off of. Now, early signs at training camp, sounds like where he's still struggling is on the inside moves, those inside counters. Can he anchor there? Does he have the power for that? We talked about him being maybe a little bit of an undersized guy. He's obviously has tremendous foot quickness that shows up on film, seems to be really good with the outside speed rushes. So that's an area to keep an eye on with him. But overall, Shayne, just really unproven. And the collection of these two guys have such an important role to keep Rodgers upright this year. We're talking about Fautanu going against guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Van Ginkel, Broderick Jones, even more difficult assignment because of the volume you're going to be going against. 2 games, Myles Garrett. We can assume 2 games of Trey Hendrickson. There's a lot of good pass rushers, elite pass rushers even. The Steelers are going to have to handle this year, and that's a big ask for these young, inexperienced offensive tackles.
Yeah, again, Fautanu I'm way more excited about because, again, I don't really know for sure what we're getting out of him at this point. Like, I assume, based on what I thought of him coming out of the draft, and he was much more of a higher floor player than Jones, to be fair, too, where not that he isn't a good athlete, he's a really good athlete, but I liked his floor a lot more than I liked Broderick. So you feel like you're going to get a good tackle out of him. It's just whether he can be a great tackle is kind of the question mark, and hopefully we get that answer sooner rather than later. But, yeah, if both of these guys struggle, I mean, you don't even really have one good backup tackle. You certainly don't have 2. You can't have both these guys play so poorly that you have to go somewhere else. And I don't expect that to happen, but these guys got to figure it out this year because if they can't play well, I think the Rodgers whole situation is dead in the water before it really even gets started.
Yeah, Shayne, and we go back to the conversation again. Did Tomlin botch the development maybe of particularly Broderick Jones? But it's like, all right, now that Broderick has 1.5 years of starting right tackle experience under his belt and almost no NFL experience at left tackle, should they have just left him there at this point? Should they have they've already went through so many lumps and he seemed to be getting it down the stretch of the season. Fautanu was a left tackle in college. That's where he's played the vast majority of his football. Like, they've messed around with it so many times, flip flop. And so it's like, are they doing the right thing now at this point, switching him again?
I honestly kind of think that they are because I think Fautanu can handle the switch pretty well. I think he'll be able to do it fine enough. And I think at this point, we've seen Broderick Jones be a bad right tackle. You might as well see if he can be a better left tackle at this point. Now, granted, in a different world, maybe they don't cling to Dan Moore like he's the puppy they lost years ago, and they let him actually just go to the bench and deal with the fact that he's not the starting left tackle. We find out if Broderick Jones can play left tackle, and then we don't have to draft Troy Fautanu. We could draft a player that is already a right tackle if we feel the need to do that, or we could draft whatever. Maybe that in that world things are better. But at this point, I think you kind of have to deal with it as it's been dealt, and I think they're doing the best thing they think they can do to try to get the most out of these guys at this point.
All right, Shayne, we've talked about Roman Wilson, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu as 3 young players who are pivotal to the success of the team this year. And we're going to wrap up with Joey Porter Jr., a guy who I think needs to have a bounce back season. He has a chance to get a good contract here coming up, but that is so contingent upon how he performs this year. I thought he took a step back in year 2. Didn't trust his instincts very well, was grabby at the top of routes, led to a ton of penalties. He needs to clean up his technique. He needs to trust himself more, that he's in good position, that he can use his physicality, size, and length to body up receivers. This is a huge year for him. And I think that how he performs, obviously, it will have a great impact on Pittsburgh's defense, but potentially even, Shayne, if he could really have a breakout campaign, you could take a really good Steelers defense and maybe make it elite again. Maybe make it how it was in 2019 and 2020, because you would assume that Jalen Ramsey would be pretty solid. Hopefully you're getting that out of Darius Slay. You don't want to see a season where Joey Porter Jr. is the weak spot of that defense and you're just targeting him down the field, assuming he's going to grab you and you get a 40-yard penalty or whatever the case might be. He needs to show that he can stick with receivers without holding them down the field.
Yeah, and I think you talked about needing a bounce back from him, and I agree, because basically if you were someone who didn't like Joey Porter Jr. coming into the draft and when Steelers picked him, last year's the year you point to, go, I told you he's going to get flagged a bunch. I told you this and that. Like, that's what happened to him last year. He just was getting kind of picked on in some ways, at least, especially by guys who were trying to just out physical him and make him grab them, and he did. He obliged to that. I think he leaned into his kind of play style in a way that was actually detrimental to him, right? Opposed to what it should be, which is where he's overly physical and kind of the Sauce Gardner type of thing, where it's like you're holding until you're not, and you're kind of like you're doing stuff until you're not. Like you have to be more clever about it than I think he was last year. I think he got frustrated at times as well. He just needs to play his game. Like we've joked about this since he was coming out of the draft. Like he could touch it from the other room, like with his arm length. Like he doesn't have to grab, I think, to stay and impact receivers and stay with them. He just needs to be able to trust his feet, trust his technique, like you talked about. And if you can do that, he should be the best corner on this team, even with the defense with Ramsey and Slay on it. And I think having those guys there will hopefully give him the confidence to kind of play more free and not worry as much about, like, grabbing onto guys all the time and trying to make sure that his guy doesn't win, because if his guy wins, it probably means the play is over for the defense. I think that will hopefully help him kind of get more comfortable with his play style and avoid those penalties.
Yeah, Shayne, I think the other reason why I listed Porter and why he needs to be that guy is because, let's be honest, he doesn't have great ball skills. And so he's at a double disadvantage here. I think when you're a bump and run man cover corner and you lack ball skills, you are very rarely going to take the ball away. So if you're not going to take the ball away, you better clean up the penalties and you better be able to shut down opposing teams' top receivers, or at least
you got to take the receiver away.
Kind of like Ike Taylor, honestly. Yeah. And it's not a bad
comp he needs in terms to be Ike Taylor, kind of.
a size, athletic, and physicality profile. Ike Taylor, a better tackler than Porter. Porter, I think, has even more upside than Taylor to be a better pure coverage guy.
He's a cover player.
But he needs to be something in that mold where Taylor did not take the ball away. I think he had 6 picks in 12 years. It's a really bad ratio.
Like that.
Really bad ratio.
Something like that.
So if Porter ends up being that guy that he is a 0 to 2 interception cornerback in a 17-game season, probably 18 games here down the line in the new CBA. If you're not going to take the ball away, you better be locked down. And so that's what we need to see from him this year. I think Pittsburgh's defense is going to largely hinge on what Porter can do this year. And so those are my 4 names that the Steelers really need to rely on for pivotal seasons. I think that they play a much bigger role than even people are giving them credit for right now. They're going to play a massive impact on the team this year. If you have any other names that you think should be included on that list, drop them in our chat below. Shayne and I go live on this show every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can also check out Josh Yorish's show. He goes live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for joining us on the show today. You can check out our work at stillcurtain.com. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.